Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today, we would like to welcome Elena, who's going to share her story of adopting through Adoptions from the Heart. So welcome, Elena.
Hi, thanks, Amanda.
So do you want to just kind of give an overview of your family and where you're at today in building your family and becoming parents?
Sure. So I have two children. The oldest, we did not adopt through Adoptions from the Heart. We adopted through another agency. She was born out in Minnesota, and we actually adopted through an agency down here in Maryland, which is where we live. She's 12 now, and my son, he's 7, and we adopted him through Adoptions from the Heart, and we worked with them the whole way through from home study all the way through to placement. And we're obviously still in touch with Adoptions from the Heart today.
Wonderful. What would you say was the biggest difference between your first placement and your second, just in terms of like the process, the journey, the support you received?
Sure. Well, the first time around, so we actually had an experience before we were placed with my daughter's birth parents or matched with my daughter's birth parents. We were working with an agency here in Maryland, and they we're right outside of DC. So they worked with DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and we kind of expected we would be placed with a birth parent in this area. And initially we were. There was a birth mom we were placed with out in Virginia. We spent a couple days at the hospital with an infant, and then she decided to parent the child. So that shaped a lot of our experience. It was kind of, very emotional. We totally understood that could happen, and I think it made us kind of reflect on that choice and how sensitive and careful those first couple days and couple weeks are, and kind of really thinking about everyone's emotions. And I now cannot remember when we placed with Lily's birth parents after that. It actually came through a set of connections through a friend of ours out in Seattle who knew someone the birth mom's father worked with. So that's how we ended up. We did not intend to travel and need to fly. I'm so glad we did, because that's the daughter that I have and love. But it really kind of, that first experience in Virginia shaped how we thought about the need for birth parent counseling and kind of how we approached our daughter's birth parents in the process.
And then when you came to Adoptions from the Heart to build your family again, what was your experience like in terms of, the support and the services, specifically what you're talking about with birth parents?
Yeah. Well, that was something that even from before we'd had that first experience that we looked for from the get-go with an agency. So I'm part of a 2-mom household. Pretty much our research was we went to the Human Rights Campaign website, and this was back in maybe mid-2010 when we were first starting to think about, okay, we think we want to do this, etc. And they had this lovely resource that was, here's the agencies that are welcoming to same-sex families. We're like, great. And they did a nice primer about different agencies and places that work locally or across the country, or working through a social service agency. And kind of through that, we really felt like private, nonprofit, domestic placement that had a focus on both supporting adoptive parents and birth parents just felt like the right fit for us. So that was our approach the first time around. And then the second time around with Adoptions from the Heart, just seeing the material from their website, how long they've been around. And I think we must have attended kind of info session at some point, but it felt like the right vibe that we were looking for as far as the services offered. We could tell they really follow birth parents throughout if they need the support. And then really also just kind of like location, right? We're in Maryland, Delaware's not far away. They work with, kind of parents in the region. So that made it a really good fit. And we've seen that bear out with the services they provide. They still help with some of the connections we have with our son's birth mom, and I know they provide some services and counseling to her.
I appreciate you kind of giving an overview of that, because I think that when folks are looking to adopt or build their family, sometimes it can be very scary of like, what is this going to look like? What type of process do I want to go through? Do I work with an attorney? Do I work with an agency? Which agency do I choose? I always try to remind families when they call in, just trying to learn about our agency, keep doing your research. We may not be the agency for you, and that's okay, but you have to make sure that you're choosing an agency that supports the values of who you are as a family. You touched on the inclusivity part to our agency, and that's really important as a same-sex couple, navigating that, because you want to make sure that you're choosing an organization that supports who you are. And I appreciate that you did all that research for a variety of factors when you were navigating how you were going to.
I have to say, it helps just having a trusted source that had filtered them out, like HRC, and we had talked to some other folks as well. I think that's one thing with gay couples. You have to figure out a way to build a family, right? It's not just going to happen for you. So in the community, it's pretty easy to talk about, right? So, there were even people I kind of casually knew through work who I knew were gay, and okay, they did IVF. What was that like? And neither one of us really wanted to be pregnant, so we didn't really explore that too much. But we kind of had heard different stories from other folks. We didn't have to seek it out that much, I think. My assumption is that's partly because we're a same-sex couple. So we didn't really go through the infertility, and now we've arrived at adoption and things like that. We just always kind of knew neither one of us feels like we must be pregnant. And I know some people want to have that experience. That was never something we saw it. So kind of at a relatively early age for this, we knew we wanted to look for adoption.
Talk to me about your perspective on birth parents, kind of coming full circle. You've adopted twice now, your relationship with birth parents, and just something you would want people to know that maybe people don't really realize about birth parents and their experience.
Yeah, I would say it's really varied. So, we learned pretty quickly to leave our preconceptions at the door, and to also really be honest with what we're comfortable with. You're filling out these forms, and at the time we had friends who were pregnant who were like, I shouldn't have caffeine, I shouldn't do this or that, and we're like, and how bad is this drug exposure, right? And partly that's just being realistic about some circumstances that might lead women to consider adoption, and that doesn't mean that's all of them, but you're thinking through some factors that you maybe didn't realize you would think through. And again, we sought advice we have a friend who's a social worker, my dad's a pediatrician. We kind of split the difference somewhere in their advice to find what we were comfortable with. And then it's just the people you meet. You really want to be open to hearing where they're coming from. And I think, looking back, I think we were certainly guarded a little bit, right? We were trying to be very open with our emotions, and I think outwardly, exchanging stories, seeing if we would match with our daughter's birth parents, but also, less than a year beforehand, we'd had this experience where the birth mom changed her mind. So we were very, I think once we were placed with, the first time around, we were like, we had shared the news, we were excited. It was way too early to do that. And, so I don't think even our parents, we didn't even text them pictures of Lily till we got home, right? So we were just really careful around all that. But we did have, I think even when we were still out in Minnesota waiting we stayed through the whole revocation period, even though where you can travel through the state, interstate compact, that had already come through. We're like, we're just gonna stay in Minnesota, we'll be here these couple weeks. And in that time, the agency we were working with out there, Lutheran Social Services, which had a similar vibe to Adoptions from the Heart, they said, oh, well, the birth parents, would you be open to seeing them again? So, she was maybe 7 days old, and we went. They lived in this tiny college town. We were closer to the Twin Cities, so we drove back out there, and we had them, we met up with them. And inside, I'm just sort of like, trying to hold my heart in one spot, but outwardly really trying to think about what they're feeling, giving them the opportunity to, be with their daughter and have that time together, and know that that's going to be a touch point and something special later, even though it's like super hard to go through and you're like emotionally exhausted. At some point, she had like a big fart or poop or something, and they were like, here you go, you can handle that. We've been doing this for a week. And with Adoptions from the Heart, it's a different experience. And we had, when we met our son's birth mom for the first time before she selected us. We had lunch, and you were there, Amanda, and like that was so helpful and supportive. We weren't able to do that with Minnesota, right? I think we'd done a Zoom call or a phone call, and the agency was. I think I remember them being part of that, but having you there and kind of that sort of zone of comfort and knowing you were so experienced was helpful.
What does your relationship look like today with your son's birth parents?
So we don't have a relationship with his birth father. We have kind of basic information, from the forms that get filled out early on, and we're open if he were ever to contact us. And then we do a relationship with Isaac's birth mom. We do send photos like every 6 months, and a letter, so those go electronically to her, and I think some of her family members as well. And then we send a letter to you, Amanda, along with the printouts of the photos. And then here and there, we've had, other contact. We've had one, we came to the picnic before, and Isaac doesn't, remember. He was, 6 months old or something. And then we had one visit when we stopped off at her place, pretty much when we were coming home from New York after visiting some relatives. So we have intermittent contact. She'll send us some emails sometimes. We're actually, after kind of connecting again through one of these Options from the Heart events, I had mentioned it to my son, and he said, I want to see her. So we're doing a Skype or Zoom tomorrow.
Yeah, and I just want to point out to our audience that one of the things I find really important about your connection to birth mom is that you're very respectful of birth mom's space. But with that being said, you still have always kept that door open. So you still send your pictures and letters. You've always left off your letters in a way that's very kind of, if and when you're ready, we would love to have a visit sort of thing.
Yeah.
And knowing the birth mom to your son, I can share that she has always found that to be really helpful for her processing, because she's still kind of going through her stuff too. And the fact that she can come and go with the openness part is really important to her. And I want our audience to hear that, because oftentimes people think it's either nothing or everything.
Yeah, and I think it's not all one thing, and it's going to change. So, we have had a couple visits with my daughter's birth family. We went out to Minnesota once. They came here once. It's been a while. The pandemic kind of, disrupted that, but we've always just taken our cues from them, right? Because their relationship to the idea of a kid, it's just going to change through time, right? And my son's birth mom has other children, so that's a factor. That's not the case, at least yet, with my daughter's birth mom. But those relationships will change, and of course, as your kids get older, there have been a couple times, maybe one time, I think on Mother's Day, when my daughter wanted to talk to her birth mom. So we texted, said, are you comfortable with this? It's okay, sure. So they had a chat. That hasn't come up again recently, but I think they know we're open to that. And the same thing with my son's birth mom, right? We understand, we all go through changes and phases in our lives. I think one thing that'll change for us as my son gets older, right? Like if we're going to make a plan and he's aware, we're going to really want to stick to it more than when he's a baby, right? Like some of that flexibility will change just because of his awareness, and his interests will change, right? At some point, will he want to meet his half siblings? Maybe, right? What does that look like? What kind of relationship might they have later? So with our kids, we made them books with pictures that really in very basic language tell the story, right? So we can kind of add details ourselves as they get older, but they'll never not know they were adopted, which is one thing we really like about open adoption. I do have some family members in extended family who decades ago placed a baby for adoption, and that we didn't find out until that child was grown up, in contact, there's a cousin somewhere. So in that kind of, at least in my extended family, that closed adoption, my read is that was not emotionally healthy. That, of course, people make their own choices, and, that's something I'm sure still happens in different ways today. But I always want my kids to know. I mean, again, gay parents, you didn't just have a baby, right? At some point they would get wise to that, but we've always, just had it be part of what they know about themselves.
Well, Elena, we really appreciate you sharing your story and your perspective, and I also like that you're open with the fact that everyone's experience may be a little different, but for you to kind of just share a little bit about your story and what you've been through, I think is really helpful for our community. And I always just respect you for your ability to put your kids first, no matter what. And I know that the birth families to your children feel the same way. So we just want to thank you again for sharing. We appreciate you coming on this platform, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Continue to tune in to future episodes here at Adoptions from the Heart.